It's like, no, I mean, it's artistic, and Push raps about coke, so let's just get...
I just love the album so much that, honestly, like, I'm just going to defend it.
Spinning it in any which way to
It was a shitty thing to do, but you know what? He did
on a pig, man.
He did it, okay?
Yeah.
Speak Easy Studios. Speak and be heard.
Yo, this is Stephen Lee.
And I'm Frank Jackson.
And we are the Distinguished Critics. We're here to break down some of our favorite albums and songs and debate what's overrated, underrated, and everything in between. So join us as we go back and relive some of music's most iconic projects. Give us a listen wherever you get your podcasts, and please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and give us those 5 stars. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of This or That. I'm Stephen Lee, as always, joined by Frank Jackson, and today we are going to be discussing 2 major albums of the 2010s with one major common thread. That's right, we're talking about Pusha T's Daytona, released on May 25th, 2018, and Jay-Z and Kanye's collaboration album, Watch the Throne, released on August 8th, 2011. Frank, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. I'm extremely honored and excited to be talking about
so prestigious.
Yeah. Pusha T versus Kanye versus Jay-Z versus Kanye, because this was crazy Kanye versus batshit crazy Kanye. So I like the fact that we got both versions of him on this.
We have, and when we say that, we're not talking about like off the rails Kanye. We're talking about batshit crazy Kanye and just regular crazy Kanye.
Oh yeah, no, this was these are 2 of the 4 versions of Kanye that we got. Nobody really epitomizes new year, new me like Kanye does.
Yeah.
You just wait till next year. Oh, he gonna have something for you.
He's probably the most polarizing figure in music, period.
Yep. I don't
think or
there's
worse.
any question about that.
And obviously, like with these episodes, what we tend to do generally is give like a nice backstory in terms of the artist. I don't think we can sit here and talk about Kanye West's rise. That would take 2 hours. I really want to focus more on where he was with these particular projects, because he's just as involved, obviously, with Watch the Throne, but even Daytona, he's just as involved in that as Watch the Throne, in my opinion.
Oh, of course. I mean, well, on Daytona, this is just full-on Kanye. Kanye produced that entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
Watch the Throne, you had so many different producers on this. You had Q-Tip, Pharrell. I had to write them all down. There's so many.
A lot of
Q-Tip,
collaborations.
Pharrell. You got 88 Keys, who, if you don't know who that is, Black Star, Pusha T. He's worked with a bunch of different people. The Far Side, like, he's been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
RZA, Swiss Beats put one of his shitty beats on there.
Yeah,
you got,
we'll get into that.
You got Hit Boy on here. Hit Boy, before he became what he is now, if y'all don't know Hit Boy, that's who's producing all of Nas's shit, this King's Disease series that has been so good in Nas's resurgence.
Yeah,
so,
he's the driving force in the renaissance that has been Nas's career over the last 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah, so Watch the Throne was really just this kind of medley of a bunch of legends, really, from production to obviously the headliners themselves,
right.
Jay-Z and Kanye, who were at 2 very different stages of their respective careers. You know, you had Kanye, who was just on a crazy run, College Dropout, Late Registration, Graduation, 808s, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and then this. And then you got Jay-Z, who, in my opinion, between the Black Album and Watch the Throne, the only good thing that he put out was American Gangster. I think there was just a bunch of shit.
Sonically, I would agree with that. You can't deny, though, that 2009's Blueprint 3 was a major success. Like, Jay is one of those...
It was hits. It had hits on it.
Right, so Billboard or one of those entities just put out a list of, like, their greatest rappers of all time, right? And Jay-Z's number 1. And I'm not the type that's going to push back on that. I think that's subjective, and if you were to have somebody like Jay in that conversation, I'm fine with it. But when you go back and look at Jay's, really since he dropped Reasonable Doubt in 1996, there wasn't one year that you can say Jay-Z owned that year until 2009. I would say that's like by default, right? Because 2009 didn't produce a whole lot of what we would consider to be like classics and also still dominate the game at that time. Blueprint 3 and Jay in 09 probably was the closest he got to like, this was Jay's year.
Yeah.
But the music was like Blueprint 3, if I'm ranking those albums, it's among the worst in his entire catalog.
I would say I agree, but I think so you and me differ on Jay. I think Jay really has just some truly terrible projects. He's a volume shooter. I think Blueprint 3 might be in his top 5, but that's just because his top 5 ain't that strong to me. Like I know people
top
might not
5
like
of his like
discography. I don't think he has that strong of a discography. Like I think Jay has
yeah, we're gonna
wholly
disagree there.
I think his peaks are as good as anybody's can possibly be, but he don't do it for me the way he does it for a lot of other people. But he's a legend,
he's a legend.
And I wouldn't push back on anyone who feels like he's the greatest rapper of all time. It's hard to make a counter argument. All you can do is present other people who you think, but you can't say like, oh, that's ridiculous. Jay-Z, he's the greatest rapper of all time. I mean, he's regarded as such by many people. It's just, I think y'all King again, is a little bit overrated.
Going back to like where Jay and Kanye were when this album came out in August of 2011, two very different places. Kanye was taking the art somewhere else. I know you mentioned like college dropout, late registration, graduation. To me, I kind of package those almost as like a trilogy.
That's his first act.
And then you have like 808s, which the death of his mother strongly influenced, and he went the complete opposite direction. And to be honest, I can't wait to cover that one day because that really
and me both.
It influenced a lot of what we've heard from Drake and Kid Cudi and all that.
Absolutely.
And then he goes into Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and some would claim, and I'm not going to dispute this either because I think it certainly belongs in the conversation. Some would consider that Kanye's greatest album. So he's fresh off the heels of Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and Jay is fresh off the heels of the monster success that Blueprint 3 is. And the interesting thing with this album is it was originally teased as a 5-song EP.
Yep.
It was called Watch the Throne, but I think that like the demand, because Kanye had collaborated with Jay really since 2000, but you had songs in more recent memory that like Monster, Run This Town. There were a lot of like big Kanye Jay collaborations. There was
a build up to it.
I think the demand was certainly there. And then once they banged out 5 songs, it was like, we're going to extend this to a full length LP.
Might as well, right?
Right.
I think this is exactly what Jay needed at this point in his career. Not so much just from I need to work with this artist who's hot type of thing. Because
that is a trend of his career.
Oh, it certainly, and we can talk about that too. Look, one of my qualms with him is he went on this whole crusade to do what he did to T-Pain, which I'll never forgive him for. And it's ironic because he's the person who was hopping on trends all this time and even used the auto-tune shit himself.
Right.
And
well, you hear it immediately on this album, so it's really hypocritical for Jay to be like...
Extremely. It was almost like he was trying to be the gatekeeper for hip-hop, but it's like, who appointed you as such?
You know what I would compare that to? So back in 96... De La Soul dropped an album called Stakes is High.
Yes.
And the whole theme of the album was like, what's going on now ain't it. We need to bring it back to the art form, the pureness of it. And Pac was like, don't criticize as your comeback. And that's what it felt like Jay was doing when he came out and was slamming T-Pain. And to collaborate with Kanye for a full-length album and be all over all of these songs when Kanye literally just dropped like an 80s themed mellowed out auto-tune project.
It just didn't make sense.
It didn't make sense at all, but that's Jay. That's Jay.
It is. So back to what I originally intended to say before I got pissed off at Jay-Z again, which happens 3 times a day. This was the perfect time for him. This was a perfect project for him because you can just kind of hear how comfortable he is with Ye. Like, I think it does bring out the best in Jay. And Kanye can produce for anyone. Like, Kanye, I don't care who it is, he will, knowing that artist, if he puts his time into it and it doesn't end up being like some Nasir shit, which, you know, if he does put his time and effort into it, he can produce for anyone and know exactly like, oh, you will sound great on this, right? So this was huge for Jay. This was just yet another win for Kanye. You know, I do think Kanye shortly thereafter would fall off, and I'll give some of my thoughts about how I felt about him on this album, but Kanye, this is another part of just really his amazing run in that time, because I do have them all, regardless of how I felt about any of the individual projects, I do think all the way from College Dropout to Watch the Throne that Kanye was just on a crazy heater. Like, he just was growing and growing and growing as an artist. At this point, he was, would have been crazy to think at first. At this point with Watch the Throne, he was as big as Jay, if not big. He's like the biggest hip hop artist that
I would say in 2011, Kanye was considerably bigger than Jay-Z.
Yeah. So the reason that I
hesitate,
I'm a little tepid about that, is because like throughout this entire thing, I mean, the legend of Jay is the legend of Jay, and it was that even then. So it's hard to say anyone is like bigger than Jay, but if you're talking about momentum, if you're talking about sales, if you're talking about whose name is generating more buzz, it's Kanye. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, again, Jay did have a pretty long run there where he didn't put out great shit. People thought that he was all but done. Yeah. You know, like,
the baton had been passed to Wayne and to
several people.
Yeah,
since.
For sure.
So, yeah, this album I do think sparked somewhat of a resurgence to me for Jay-Z. I think that it's the best he sounded in years.
Probably what, since American Gangster in 2007?
Since American Gangster, so it had been, what, 4 years?
4 years, yeah.
Which, you know, isn't the longest time, but it's a long time in hip-hop.
In hip-hop, you might as well look at hip-hop years like a running back's year in football, or a career in football. Yep. Like 3 or 4 years can take a lot out of you, and if you don't pop and stay popping, then you're going to get cut and you're out the league. I mean, and obviously that wouldn't happen to Jay, but it is one of those things where it's like, man, that's a drought. It's like dog years, you know?
Right.
Because Jay's entire run, it was drop an album 96, 97, 98, 99. And I'm not saying he had to do that in the late 2000s, but you could tell that he, outside of American Gangster, which was a conceptual, basically soundtrack for a movie where he could kind of slide into a character.
Which in part, you know, like you're saying, part of the reason that album was so good was because of that movie was so damn good.
Yeah.
Like, people love that movie so much that the soundtrack, typically a movie that does really well, that has a soundtrack from a well-respected artist, is going to do really well.
Well,
like, think Kendrick and Black Panther. Or
Dre and Compton.
Right.
You know, exactly. That's another one. But they're able to slide into this role where, like, they can just embody the essence of the movie. Mm-hmm. Jay standalone before and after with, like, Kingdom Come. Yep. We talked about Blueprint 3. Yep. There were serious questions in terms of, like, all right, how's he going to hold up against Kanye? Because Kanye is so red hot at this time. Mm-hmm. Kanye was getting canceled before canceled was even a word. So outside of, like, his music just being incredible, it was also this like, the controversy. Figure. Yeah, the controversy was there with, like, the Taylor Swift thing, showing up to the red carpet just with a bottle of Henny, like, all right, fuck it, I'm gonna say what I want to say and do what I want to do.
That happened years prior to that. Right. It was one of those things where Kanye really is a walking, like, sort of a Rorschach test for like, how do you view publicity? Like,
you see a lot of that on this album too, and
Yeah.
I do want to get into the project.
He gets into it. Yeah.
For those listening or watching, we actually opted to not go with the deluxe version of this album. I'm always a stickler for stuff like that, right? Like, I'm a proponent of, I don't need 5 extra Best Buy exclusive tracks on there. It waters down the project. You can tell that they were leftovers that weren't originally intended for the album, or they would have been released if that were truly the case. So I really wanted to strip this down to, 12, 13 songs that it is, and kind of view that. And I feel like that's a more apt comparison for Daytona only being 7 songs. But for me, when you see artists drop a project and then it's re-released, or there's, if you order it from this site, you get 3 extra tracks. I don't really consider that canon as far as these projects.
Agreed. I'm with you on that. I mean, I think it's important to capture the essence of these things at the time, right? And when it dropped, it was 12 songs.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, to me, is really that simple. Like, when this was released, what was it?
Right, and they actually took a swing and missed. Now, not in terms of success, but the first song that was intended for Watch the Throne was Ham. And Ham is like, through and through, the Lex Luger early 2010s trap sound that you literally just heard on a Ross record or a Gucci record. And that song, people were saying, I'm going ham. Like, it's not like it didn't stick, but Jay is on record as having said, we didn't feel like that was the one that we wanted to go forward with. This album has an amazing, 7 singles on it. It's insane to me.
It literally does have that many singles on it.
It's been certified quintuple platinum, and, at the time when they went out on tour for this, it was the most successful hip-hop tour of all time until I think, Drake and Future topped that 15 years,
and
or
Drake
5
and 21
years later.
are probably about to top
Right.
even that.
But when this dropped, I don't want to say that this album changed the way music was going. It's not like some of these discussions that we've had where it's like, this changed the sound for the next 2 or 3 years. To me, this was just one artist who could use a jolt in the back and another artist that wasn't missing with anything that he did at the time. And what you get out of this project is, in my opinion, I don't want to say Kanye carried it, but I do notice after revisiting it, 11, 12 years later, Jay, to me, it's funny that you say that, he really stepped his shit up. I'm not saying he didn't, but he did take a back seat to Kanye on this project for me.
So I think part of what made this successful to me, from a Jay standpoint, is that sometimes you have to know when. I mean, think about, we don't have enough time to talk about Kanye's ego, right? But think about Jay's ego.
It's pretty big too.
And who
Pause.
he is. Yep.
Is that what they say?
That's what
these
they
days?
say.
Okay. Can't say the other.
It doesn't rescue it, but that's what they say.
Yeah.
And who he is and what he is to the game. For him to kind of understand and find the pocket, right, where you're taking the back seat to Kanye, but you're not riding his coattails, right? It's not that thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to just let this dude carry me to success. It wasn't that. But I think Jay, rightfully so, clearly understood, given who Kanye is right now, Kanye should be the one in the driver's seat with this album.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, given all the production he did on it and given his, just throughout the album, you can tell that he was really the lead on it.
Right.
I think that's part of what made Jay so great, because we didn't get too much of him. It's like we got the perfect amount of him on this. It wasn't bloated with too many Jay verses.
Correct. And in contrast, I think Kanye didn't overshadow it either. It was one of those things where it did feel like a very blended album in the right way. If you're going to make a collaboration album, and this is arguably a top 5 rapper of all time and a top 5 producer of all time, then you have to know your strengths and weaknesses, and you got to find a way to balance all that out. You don't want this to be the Blueprint, where it's literally Kanye just doing a Jay-Z record on the boards, and it's all Jay. You're getting way too much of Jay. Like, this was a good balance in terms of, who's coming in where, who's doing this hook. They go back and forth on a lot of verses, which I really appreciate when artists can do that. Styles P and Jadakiss are masters at this. They'll finish each other's bars. It sounds perfectly gelled. Yep. And on certain songs on this album, you see Kanye and Jay really take the time to like kind of put this together like that. The thing with Kanye is, and it's similar to Dre for me, right? Kanye isn't the producer that's pushing every single button and playing the drums and playing the piano. He has this grander vision, and he assembles this team and allows them to do what they do best, and then he'll sit there and tweak it, slow this down, speed this up, and then by the end you have a near flawless record by the end of the process. And Dre's very much like that too. I think the same thing goes for the rapping, right? Mm-hmm. Kanye's pen isn't bad, but he's had ghostwriters. I would suspect that there was a lot of ghostwriting on this project, but it doesn't take away from it.
No, not at all. I mean, yeah, like you say, it's not like Kanye has a weak pen, but he also isn't. He ain't Eminem. He ain't like one of these people with just crazy penmanship that
he's not Lupe Fiasco. It's right. It's not that.
But he delivers that shit.
Well, he shares that with Dre too.
Exactly.
Where it's like the delivery's there, so I could care less if he wrote this.
And
or not.
like Dre, but to an even further extent. And I got a question about this. Kanye is the sample king.
Right.
I don't think there has been, and there might not ever be, somebody who's better at that. Is Kanye a top 5 producer all time to you?
Yes. Yeah. Kanye is a top 5 producer. And I think like that question naturally pops up in your head when you're listening to an album like this and even doing research in terms of what happened before and after. And it does remind you, yeah, if you don't have Kanye in there, who are you? I mean, it'd have to be a total regional take where it's like, like see for me, for example, my favorite producers of all time are Beats by the Pound. My second favorite producer is DJ Quick. 3 through 5 can vary, but Kanye's pretty much always going to be in or around that fold.
I think Kanye, Dre, and Quick have to be mainstays.
Right.
From there, it could be Primo. It could be RZA.
Right.
It could be
Pharrell.
It could be Pharrell. It could be Manny Fresh.
It is not Swizz Beatz. God damn it.
No, not in my top 10.
Let's talk about this album because I want to get on I want to start with that. This album is excellent. It starts off with 5 absolute bangers, and you can tell they were shooting for that. No Church in the Wild, Liftoff, In Paris, Otis, Gotta Have It. All of these work. All of these work as big stadium booming singles. You can tell on Liftoff, the second song, they were going for that All of the Lights type of success. You got like the orchestra feel, and instead of Rihanna, you got Beyonce on it. It didn't quite hit the mark in terms of it being that big, but they definitely were going for, no, we want to go on tour and have all of these hit.
So, this album has outstanding production. It's extremely well put together. So sometimes to me it's as simple as like when I listen to a full project front to back, nothing at all sounds out of place in any way. And I don't mean like the songs don't mesh together well. I mean like just every instrument had a purpose. Like every sound that you heard on the track had a purpose.
Or sample or kind of like flipped.
Everything that was put there, it should have been there.
Intentional.
Like it felt like it should have been there, right?
Right.
That being said, I don't like this album that much, and I never have.
You're serious right now.
I'm dead ass serious.
Hit me with a 180.
I never have liked this album that much. I think so there's things.
Why?
There's things to like about it, right?
Okay.
So the things to like about it. Like I mentioned before, I think Jay gave us the perfect amount of Jay. And I think he did a good job in kind of letting Kanye drive this thing. Like I said before, the production. I enjoy the production on this. That being said, I think this album is like 3 great songs, and it feels like they kind of just mailed it in.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, well now, I was going to go a different direction, but since you said 3 great songs and the rest they mailed it in, I mean, what are the 3 that hit for you?
So I would say Niggas in Paris, Otis. Maybe it's just 2, if I'm being honest.
You didn't like Gotta Have It, produced by
Sure.
Pharrell, with the James Brown and the little flute in the background?
It's good, but if I'm talking, like, this is the thing. If it's Jay and it's Kanye and it's all these people working on this album, look at the names that contributed to this album.
Yeah,
I
and they
expect
delivered.
something better than this.
They delivered. I mean,
I can't.
The RZA on New Day, and they even flipped like the little nod to Raekwon, me and the RZA connect. I felt like everything was purposeful.
Yeah, right. And that's
but just musically
things to like about it. But
you have to take issue with the lyrics then, or the subject matter.
That's what it is.
Okay.
That's what it is. To me, it was more so just kind of like it just felt like it was a lot of fat and no substance. Like it just, and it's not like I needed them to put together some shit that's just crazy and thought provoking and like, oh, here's this deep album from Jay and Kanye. I didn't need that. I didn't need Kanye to be Kanye from Late Registration.
Like Jesus Walks Kanye or
I didn't need that, but it also just, that entire album almost felt like, if I could break it down to bare bones, it was we rich as fuck and the media hates me.
That's definitely the theme of the album. I think you're looking at 2 artists that are struggling with being that big, and both of them are dealing with that in different ways.
Well, ironically, I think Jay. So yes, I would say, but in 2 very different ways, right?
Oh yeah,
like Kanye is probably struggling with the level he's gotten to, and Jay in a different way is struggling with the level he's gotten to. As someone who I know at that point clearly viewed himself, because many people did feel like, I'm the GOAT of this shit, right?
Yeah.
But
like, where do I go from here?
But people were not. He wasn't coming off of great. Now, Blueprint 3, yes, that was commercial success. He was a little bit hot when this came out, but for the most part, most of his last 7-8 years were just like, Jay don't have it no more.
Yeah, Jay, and again, this came out in 2011. This is the hottest period Jay had really since the Black Album in 2003.
Exactly.
Just going back real quick to because I agree, the theme of the album is like, I am rich as a motherfucker, and like,
and from Kanye's perspective, the media hates me.
The media hates me. Kanye. Okay, so Jay on this project feels like he's more concerned with sustained generational wealth. He didn't have his children at this time. He's talking about fatherhood. He's talking about like, hey, the higher I go, there's not too many of us, referring to, like to black people. And he talks about Will Smith
parts
and
of
Oprah.
the album I really did enjoy. I like. There was shit that they...
Murder to Excellence is a song that touches on that.
That's right. So I think that might be part of what I take issue with as well, where it's like, why did we only get a little bit of what y'all could have really unlocked? I didn't need a full album of that.
Yeah.
But just... It was just up and down for me.
Yeah, there is some up and down elements. The music is great throughout.
I skipped like 4 songs on this album. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like I'm not. This is not a front to back album for me at all. Now I'll listen to the hits all day. Look, like all right, No Church in the Wild, Niggas in Paris, Otis. I listen to Gotta Have It, Murder to Excellence.
So basically 5 out of 12, and you're skipping 7. So not only
Skip
is it
most
not
of the
a
album.
front to back, you're basically saying this had infinite potential and you guys severely underwhelmed.
So I think that
relative to expectation,
the greatest parts of this album were so great that it's gonna live forever, right? Like,
well, the hits are still living forever.
I mean, they're all time great, especially when you're talking about Niggas in Paris. Like that beat is just gonna be forever. Like after we're gone, that beat is gonna still be alive.
And within Paris, it's like you get like the quotables that you can stop the record in the club and everybody's gonna be like, "What she order? Fish fillet?" Like that's always going to be there.
That's a perfect song. really. Like, I just, in terms of they really put together a perfect song there, where it's like the beat is crazy addictive. You're not gonna be able to get it out of your
It's
head.
not
right?
Ham. It's not a Lex
No,
Luger knockoff.
no.
Like it was a
They got
fresh sound.
quotables all day, and they both spitting on it. It's
Yeah.
not like just the entirety of that song. And I'm not saying the whole album needed to be that, or the whole album needs to be Otis. Which, spoiler alert, I like Otis even more than I like that song. But it's just, I feel like there's for most of this album, I feel like they melded in.
I'm not quite there with it. Do I think that this is a hip hop classic? No. Do I think that it's a fun album that you could throw on and kind of let ride through? And again, I'm not saying that I love every song, but I don't think that there's like some noticeably whack shit on here. I did want to put a button on the conversation that we were having about the theme of the album, though. So Jay being like concerned with like, okay, where am I going from here? But everything still being, I heard somebody say Jay's like a walking press release and Kanye's like the TMZ, like the tabloid fodder. And I agree with that. Kanye's theme on this album is I'm rich as fuck, but there's a loneliness to it. That's what I gauge. Like, it's almost like there's some desperation in terms of what he's rapping about, how he's delivering it. For a guy that made Jesus Walks, on this album, it's Mary Magdalene on a pole, on a pole. He's all over the place, and you could attribute a lot of that to him having lost his mom just, 2.5, 3 years before that, whatever it was. Things started to change. It was shifting that way, but this was one of the last projects from Kanye that I can say, like, I will go back and listen to and thoroughly enjoy. No Church in the Wild, I think that, just real quick, I think the biggest outside contribution, not musically, but just in terms of appearances, I loved Frank Ocean and The Dream.
Yes, agreed.
On this album.
Agreed.
I thought both of them on No Church in the Wild was excellent. I thought Frank Ocean now Made It in America is a little hokey. The chorus.
It is a little hokey, but you know what? That is another song.
It's a good song.
I do like that song.
It's a good song.
Yeah.
I don't feel like they mailed this in. I would not, again, say that this is a classic. I'd probably give it more of like a 7.5 out of 10. It's an enjoyable record. I have a lot of great memories with this album. I remember the day it came out. Me, Jake, Brigham, we're driving up to Tallahassee, and we must have listened to this thing front to back, probably 4 or 5 times because it was so fresh and new on the scene. Not fresh in terms of like a totally different sound, but it felt like an extenuation of Dark Twisted Fantasy.
So, I would say even though Jay had his ego in check on this, I still think the collective ego in the room made them feel like they could just go in there and
plank on $1 million.
They could just
like literally just kind of drop whatever
and flex for a whole album.
That's what it was,
which has never been my cup of tea. Like, I don't care who it's from. Like, you could be my favorite rapper. I'm not trying to hear you flex on an entire album. It's not because I'm a hater. Like, go get your money, bro. Like, I'm always going to be happy about that. But it's also like, if you're bigger than that, you know what I mean? Like, right now, right? Like, Jay would never make that album now.
Well, I don't think there's any
so much.
Yeah. There's no chance of a sequel to this
bigger,
ever happening, in my opinion.
And they were bigger than that then.
Right.
Maybe not. Kanye was still kind of coming into it.
Back then, I would say Kanye was as big as...
No. I'm not talking about big as an artist. I'm talking about, like, Kanye was still coming into, like, money he hadn't even imagined that he'd get.
Right.
Jay was already this kind of super... I don't know. It just felt like two teams flexing to me. Like,
it was the climate of hip-hop at the time, too, though.
Yeah.
And they catered to it.
But what standard do you hold Jay and Kanye to?
That's fair.
Right? Are you everyone else? Are you fucking Mims?
Right.
Or are you Jay and Kanye?
Or DJ Unk or one of these guys.
Like, what are you? So I guess that's what my problem is with the album.
You felt like it could have been a lot better.
I just think they didn't reach their full potential.
That's fair.
And I think that is fair to expect them to. given who they are. Like, yeah, I said I might think Jay's a little bit overrated, but understand that me saying Jay's a little bit overrated only means that I don't think he's the GOAT.
Right.
Like,
well, how many times have we argued Jay and Big? You know, and you want to kill me,
that's a ridiculous argument.
I think if you strip this, like for me, right, like I view it through the lens of I can enjoy this for what it is,
right,
which is like we got an album out of them. And you could also look at that on the flip side, like it should have been more, but like I never thought that would happen, and I thought it was a really fun album. Like there's not too many like dreary moments.
It is a fun album. I can certainly agree with that.
Like it is made for the stadiums. Like I would say all but a few songs are not songs that are intended to be played in front of 20,000 people.
Right. I could agree on that. So, I mean, I guess just all in all, I think the album is well put together, extremely well put together from a production standpoint. But I just think that the star players didn't bring it as hard as they could.
They dropped like 15
lyrically.
points when you're expecting 32 out of them.
Exactly.
Right.
But that being said, do you have, what is your like favorite? Is it just like Niggas in Paris? Is it just the simple one, or is it something?
So Paris falls into a category, right, where that is a single I've heard way too many times. I don't feel that way about every big single. I feel that way about like Paris. I feel that way about California Love. I feel that way about certain major songs that you're still going to hear all the time. Yeah. No Church in the Wild is pretty much easily my favorite song.
Perfect song too.
Like it was awesome with like the guitar riffs, and it felt like
really cool,
almost kind of like 80s rock. And then you got the Dream with like his squealing auto tune. The Dream doesn't get enough credit for his contributions to a lot of projects that you wouldn't even know he was associated with. But yeah, No Church in the Wild.
Yeah, that's easily I would say in my top two.
Right.
But I'll go
top two out of the three that you enjoy on this album, mind you. Yeah.
Otis, I think Otis is my favorite on here.
Got the classic Otis Redding Try Little Tenderness sample. That's like a callback to like what Kanye used to be. You know, like production wise and all
what
of that.
Kanye is still, hell, we're about to get into an album that came out just a few years ago.
Yeah, let's do that.
And
let's talk about
Kanye
Pusha
could
T.
still do that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Pusha T. I don't want to get into the whole clip story, right? Because I'm sure that there will be a time when we are discussing Lord Willin' or Hell Hath No Fury. Pusha has, I feel like I say this about a lot of artists that we talk about, but a lot of them really do have like some unique paths in terms of how they got to where they are. Pusha's is like especially weird.
Way up there.
The first time I ever heard Pusha T was on the 504 Boys album, Goodfellas. Pharrell did a song for Master P and Crazy, and Pusha T hopped on there, and he was called like Terror at the time.
Yeah.
Then the clips started to bubble, and then around 2010, and all of their projects leading up to that as a group were like super critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
Pharrell and the Neptunes were handling every beat, and then around 2010, Pusha's brother, the other member of the Clips, Malice, says, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm going to convert to Christianity like for real and go live a completely separate life. And it's amazing to me how that happens in 2010. By 2011, Good Music scoops Pusha up, and he goes from Pharrell handling everything to now Kanye handling everything. And with Push, I think the big song for me that was like, okay, he might be a viable solo act, even though the Clips are no more. Mercy was a huge record that came out in 2012 on the compilation, and Pusha dropped 2 albums before this one that we're getting ready to discuss now, Daytona. What was it? My Name Is My Name and The Darkest Before Dawn. I think they were released in 2013 and 2015, respectively. They're not bloated. They're my style of albums in terms of like they're in that 10 to 12 song range, but like those albums felt a little reachy for radio.
Yeah.
Like you got a lot of features on there. They were trying to blow him up, but Push is at his best when he's in just bar mode, you know, like we talked about coke rap on a few episodes. Trap music is one of them.
I mean, this is the Curtis Mayfield of rap. Like this is him.
Pusha's whole career is based on being a D-boy. Every other line is like nose candy or,
Which
all that.
I would say for
he found his lane.
another artist, it's like,
It'd be stale. It'd be stale
like
real
this shit
quick.
is tired, but somehow, like Push manages to, and again, like we are not understating. Like every song is about that, like always.
Yeah, if it ain't beef, it's about blow.
It's always about.
It's one of
that.
the two B's.
But, yeah,
he's either
right.
got beef with somebody or he's talking about,
and he's talking about blow on a track that he has beef with them on.
Yeah.
So
Which he does on Daytona. But
it always is about that, but you just don't get tired of it. Like, it doesn't feel gimmicky. It's just kind of like that's his lane. Like, he kind of trademarked that shit, even though, God, thousands before him, tried to take this lane, and a lot of them had successful careers from talking about, but Pusha T is really like...
Well, he's 23 years in the game now, and this has been his MO from day one.
If anybody who knows hip-hop, you ask them who's the first person they think of when you mention, like, cocaine rap,
yeah,
it's going to be Push, like, forever.
Right.
So, I would say...
Well, let's get into this particular project, but also the circumstances that were like leading up to it, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about the two albums that dropped on Good Music, and they both were very critically acclaimed. Push album sales are kind of irrelevant when we're talking about projects in the mid 2010s, but these were like top 10 Billboard type of albums that he was dropping. By the time 2018 rolls around, people are waiting on that next one because it had been about 2 or 3 years since he dropped his last project. And then Kanye comes out with this game plan that he's going to release 5 projects, over the once a week. Everyone's going to be 7 songs because that is the bare minimum requirement in terms of what qualifies as an album. Even though it's more of an EP,
Right.
This is still technically an album at 7 songs. And Push is in that fold. And why don't you go ahead and start with, like, when you heard that this rollout was happening, what was your initial thoughts?
I was crazy excited because,
Right.
like, I mean, one thing throughout all of the Kanye stuff, I think anybody who ever was or is a Kanye fan, one thing you're always going to be excited about is his production on something. Like, it couldn't have possibly mattered how I felt about Kanye personally at the time. When I heard Kanye is fully producing these albums,
Like
I was
35 songs over 5 albums. Yeah, I'm in, right?
I'm fully in
Yeah.
on that. Like, I need to hear that. And that's why still to this day, like, Kanye is falling way off to me. But I'ma always, no matter what he drops, I'ma listen to that production on it. I still want to hear that because that's one thing that he has not lost at all. So, I would say that the two that I was looking most forward to were this one and Nasir, right?
Oh, so
And-
even you were looking forward to Push more than even Ye, the album
well,
that he dropped.
Yes, because
We had, Life of Pablo or whatever was before that.
Kanye had already
Kind of
been
fallen
not
off for
good
you.
to me
Yeah.
for years at that point.
This
Like,
is MAGA Kanye too.
Yeah, this
we're,
is
we're-
full-blown,
We're talking like peak like red hat Kanye.
this is stage 1 of stage 3 Kanye.
Yeah.
So, but even aside from all of that shit, just musically, Kanye had not been, like, as a rapper, he had not been good to me for years at that point. So I was far more looking forward to Nasir and Push because I always did like Push, right? And I thought, like, man, if he just had it just a little something, and it was this, right? Like, oh, Kanye's gonna produce his entire album, which, it wasn't a long album. I say that like it's 15 songs, but still.
It's more like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Like in terms of the total.
You could listen to this while you brush your teeth and get dressed, and by the time you get in the car, the album is over. But still,
Right.
this shit is... All right, we'll get into that in a minute. So,
Is it crack? I mean, is it like, did Pusha do his job? Did he serve us this way? Because I would say so, right? Like, it's one of those things. He was the first one to drop out of this lineup that Kanye
Yes.
was rolling out. And
which is part of what that's why I was so hyped for Nasir.
because
Like,
once
I'm
you
not
heard
gonna
Daytona.
get too much into that because we'll talk about that at another time.
Yeah.
These two albums produced very different results. Not from a production standpoint, and there's reasons for it and all of that, but we'll get into that at a different time.
Yeah.
So
right now we're just briefly touching on the Wyoming sessions.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
that was a collective thing. And
That's what that was.
When you talk about Daytona, you have to mention that part of it.
Right. So this is the first one that rolls out, and oh my God. Like, I didn't even know, and again, I was a fan. I always liked Push, but I didn't even know he had this shit in him. This was the best rapping he'd ever done, and this is, you'd be hard pressed with the catalog Kanye had already built up through this time as a producer. This is among his very best work ever.
I agree.
Throughout this entire album, this was both of them at their absolute best. And this is only 7 songs. I put this up against like 98% of the albums that have ever been released. And it's only 7 songs. Like
98% of albums that have ever been
just
released.
This is one of my favorite albums. Like,
Okay.
I think this is a super classic to me. Like, I really do love this album to that level where I feel like I can listen to this shit I could listen to this album like 4 times in a row, and then it'll be done in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I agree though, man, because like the thing when you get like a 7-song album, like if you can capture the genie in the bottle for those 7 songs, you do have a classic on your hand because it's so insulated. It's so airtight that like there's no room for error. Like on this album on Daytona, I don't feel like Push wasted any bars.
not a single one.
I feel like every line was enunciated the exact way it should have been. Like it was crafted very well.
And Kanye was featured on this album rapping, right?
What would Nick do? Yep.
And Kanye even put that was some vintage Ye shit.
Well, it starts off you can clearly tell that Kanye heard King's Dead.
Yes.
And it started off with that Future that whoop-de-whoop,
yeah.
But then he jumps into the verse,
But this is it really brought out the best, it even brought back a Kanye that I hadn't heard rap that well in years.
He killed that shit, man.
What would Meek do? That shit.
He destroyed that.
This is one of those, and by the way, I'm a big proponent of starting your albums off hot. That's important to me.
Grab my attention within the
selecting
first.
your track listing and making sure that from the very beginning I'm there with it, right?
Right.
And they started the album off, If You Know, You Know. Which is, that's just become part of the American zeitgeist since then. That's just a saying, period now. But that's an all-timer.
Well, I like how it starts off too because it doesn't just hit you in the face with the production. Push is kind of rapping and you hear a little bit of the snares and then it drops and really again 7 songs and Kanye didn't miss on now one of them.
Not even
this is a blink and you'll miss it type of project, but that's also what keeps me going back to it. I listened to this album in preparation for this, even though it's one of my all-timers of the 2010s, in terms of what was released in that decade, and I listened to it probably 4 or 5 times today, and it's such an easy listen because Pusha does have that clear, distinctive voice. His flow is impeccable.
He got bars for days.
He's got bars, man.
Bars for days in general, but on this album, he his pen was crazy strong throughout this entire
You go back
album.
and listen to it, and it's you'll find new little gems too, where he has
which
a
is
line.
something I love.
And I'm paraphrasing here, but he had a line where he's I'm your ghost, I'm your ray, purple tape, save for rainy days, and it's rainy days being on the purple tape. It's
Yes.
when you pay attention to the little intricacies that Push was able to get off his chest here, because it's so short of an album. You're forced to pay attention to everything that he's saying.
And it should be noted, right, between the time that Watch the Throne came out and Daytona came out, that's 7 years. That's 7 years that had, in that span, right, 2 albums from Push, a bunch of shit from Kanye, and period, not just musically, but Kanye over the course of those 7 years, just who would have saw that coming, right? But when it comes to I keep going back to this because it's so relevant to me when you talk about Kanye. If you go back to 2004 and go back to 2008, 2011, 2018, his production just is always there. Like, he's never gonna. It's why it's still alive for me, where it's like he could drop some shit in 10 years and I bet it's gonna at least sonically be on point.
Well, for the past like 5 years for me, I've been at a point where I'd rather just have him release his albums
As an instrumental?
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, Dre did do that with 2001, and
Yeah.
I'd be much more inclined to listen to that than, you know, whatever he's doing now. I don't want to hate on him too much, but he's fallen off a cliff just, again, because we're talking about the standard and what he's established himself as. It's nowhere near what it was. But in 2018, again, I think production on all 5 of those albums was outstanding, but this one was just a notch above anything. I think that 2018 was a pretty solid year for hip-hop. We did get the Black Panther soundtrack, I believe, that year, but if I'm picking an album of the year, it's Daytona. I mean, Kanye's featured on this. Ross is featured on this. You don't want too many features on a 7-song album.
I think it was that's it. That's all you need on that.
Ross did his thing on hard piano. That's my favorite song on the album. I love, like, the keys remind me of, like, some modern, like, Mobb Deep, like, Havoc. Like, they're dark. And then it kind of goes
Havoc,
into...
by the way, unbelievably underrated producer. But continue.
Shout out to Havoc.
Yeah,
You know,
seriously.
like, he
please.
deserves his flowers, man. They
He
don't talk
really
about him
does.
enough. But yeah, hard piano, and then the way it transitions into the chorus, and then you have like this really like almost like Miami Vice, like 80s type of backdrop to it. We have to talk about the controversy.
Well, there's a couple of them, right? So
He always manages to sneak that in.
So there's a couple of them. One of them being that the album cover was controversial
Oh man,
in
I
itself,
forgot about that. Yeah,
because this is Whitney Houston's bathroom with drug paraphernalia all over it, and as you know, Whitney was on that shit for a long time, right?
Yeah, man.
So rest in peace, Whitney Houston. So
The greatest vocalist of all time. I don't care what anybody says.
we can argue about that another time.
I know. Sorry.
I'm not. It's not a crazy take, but anyway, that was already controversial because I mean, you know, a lot of people, including Bobby Brown, you know, he shuffled his jaw back and forth, and then he said, "I feel like that was in poor taste."
Yeah, Kanye paid $85,000 to use that.
Yes, Kanye went out of pocket for that shit, right?
It's art. I mean, now again,
Look,
for an artist like Pusha T, it does work. It does work.
I mean,
If this is his whole mantra and this is his identity as an artist,
It is kind of in poor taste,
but
right?
not Whitney, man. You
I
ain't got to
get
do
it.
it to Whitney. It could have been any dirty bathroom with a crack pipe.
I mean,
Come
look,
on.
Pusha T ain't sell her that shit. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, what you want him to do, this was a great, really, from an artistic standpoint.
And a marketing standpoint.
Exactly.
It got you talking about it.
Exactly.
Like, oh shit, that's Whitney's bathroom. Let me go check out the album.
You know, so I will say this too. I would feel entirely different about it if he went and got this shit and it wasn't public domain or public knowledge. Like, that's something that was classified, and then he went and got it, and people was like, "Oh,
Hence
shit,
the
for
85
real?"
grand. Yeah.
But this had been seen by people. Now, maybe it was. I mean, obviously, he brought it out to a much wider audience, right?
You think? Yeah, like this album was like
It
was everywhere.
He brought it out
So,
to a much wider audience. I'm trying my best.
It's just like, no, I mean, it's artistic, and Push raps about coke, so let's just
I
get
just love the album so much that honestly, like, I'm just gonna defend it.
spinning it in any which way. To
It was a
make
shitty thing to do, but
putting
you know what? He
lipstick on
did
a
it.
pig, man.
He did it. He did it. Okay.
Yeah.
God damn it, get over it. All right. So, that was one of the controversies, but that one pales in comparison to.
Infrared, the last song on the album. So Push has always had issues with Cash Money and Lil Wayne. Where that stems from, to be honest, I'm not quite sure. I honestly think it started off as sport because the Clips did collaborate with Birdman and all them back in the day. What Happened to That Boy was a big record. Still love that song. It might have had to do with like the Bape thing. I don't know. But anyways.
He did not mince words.
Pusha T, Infrared to me is one of the best diss tracks I've heard of the last 10 years. Because it's not, first of all, that shit was played out by the mid-2000s. And then with an artist like Game, like everything has to be a diss. Pusha like managed to make like a hot song. And Drake is good at this too. He went hard at Drake, but he made a hot song where
he's a hell of a battle with them.
He made a song where it's like he's spitting and you're enjoying the song, but there are jabs all throughout. Like Wayne because Wayne was going through his Cash Money drama at the time. Mm-hmm. And obviously Push has Ross on the album. And he's basically saying, look at him. He's Flash without the fire. This is what it looks like. Ross recognizes that, you know? And then as far as like the Drake thing, which is to me the bigger thing, because the most you're going to get out of Wayne is like a fuck Pusha T tweet, you know? I feel like Push baited Drake right where he wanted him.
Yeah, he did.
He baited him right
because he knew he had the ace of spade, right?
He had the napalm bomb ready to go.
He had that shit, and all he did was he's like.
So as good as Infrared is, I mean, and as far as like going at Drake, it is about the ghostwriting. That was a hot topic back in 2018.
Yep.
Drake was about to release Scorpion, his double album, which is a good album by the way. But Push, knowing this, decided, okay, now's the time I'm going to do this, and talked about the ghostwriting. I believe the album that they said Quentin Miller ghostwrote a lot on was More Life. It was one of those, but this was floating around everywhere, and Push baited him in. Drake responds with this Duppy freestyle. Cool record.
I don't know why Drake or any of his stands, and by the way, I have no problems with Drake.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously, Drake is a great artist, right? But why would anybody have an issue with him being called out for the ghostwriting shit? Like, what do y'all think Drake is?
Well, okay, no, let me say this real quick. Here's my thing with that. I have no problem with ghostwriters. Like, Snoop has them. Dre has them. Kanye has them.
People have
but then you can't say that, like, MCing is your thing.
Right.
And
yes.
Drake has gone on record and said, I rap. My pen is sharp. And so, like, if you're going to call yourself an MC, then you better, I don't care if somebody writes your hook or helps you with a bar, but, like, you can't have other songs penned by completely different people. So Drake drops the, and I know we're veering off the actual album, but all of this is tied together. Drake drops the Duppy freestyle. And it's a cool little record. You know, Drake is slick when he throws his little shots. He'll say something, but it's cool at the same time. Pusha comes out with the story of Adidon. And the cover is Dre embarrassingly in blackface, and Pusha saying, man, you got a baby from a porn star that you're hiding from the world. You were going to roll him out for an Adidas campaign. And Drake, and he's going at 40's health and all, Drake's producer's health, and because he has MS and everything. Pusha held nothing back. And in my opinion, he won that beef because Drake bowed out.
I agree.
Like, not too many people can say that they went against Wayne and they went against Drake and their careers didn't end. He had such a way of getting under their skin.
Like, I'll say this, right? Because no matter what, as big as Pusha T is, he'll never be, most people won't ever be as big as Drake, right?
He doesn't have the ability to.
So the like, when Drake makes his shit, it's going to get more
reach.
People are going to just blow it like way out of proportion and make it this gigantic thing. And especially, I mean, you remember the back-to-back shit with Meek, like that became something that was just like,
that's another
people are
top
like,
5 diss song of the 2010s in my opinion.
I mean, Drake can channel that shit. That's the thing, right? Is you think it's like this little timid bunny rabbit, and it's like, no, don't. He went at Common too. Don't try him because he will hire somebody to write a good diss.
There you go.
So.
Had to sneak that in, didn't you?
So he did put up a fight, but Push, look, you're not going to win because Push, this shit was just so calculated for him.
Oh, it's chess, not checkers.
And I mean, checkmate.
Checkmate. Like, what does Drake come back and even say to?
Well,
and
bro,
again, I don't want to linger on this too much, but like, this is so much a product of like Daytona and what was going on.
This shit forced Drake to have to address it.
Yeah.
And
not address it on a record, basically say, yeah, I have a son from a porn star. I love him though, I'm a good dad.
No, it was, so, I mean, that's just, we say all of this to say like, There's 7 songs on this album,
Caused a ripple effect.
and it made some damn noise outside of just the outstanding music that's on it. Like, this album is perfect to me. Like, it's absolutely perfect to me. It's hard to capture this type of thing when you only have 7 songs.
Right.
Like, how long is the album officially?
21 minutes. 21 minutes. And again,
It is 7 songs,
blink and you miss
21
it.
minutes.
Blink and you miss it, but it adds a lot to the replay value. A lot. This is an album you could kind of have on loop for about 2 or 3 hours, like 2 hours if you wanted to.
This is shorter than a sitcom episode with commercials.
Correct. He squeezed all of that in there and managed to get it Drake something serious.
But it's still perfect. That's the crazy part.
Right.
Like, I would just implore you, if you haven't heard it for some reason, definitely go give that a listen. But even if you haven't listened in a while, man, revisit this shit and really listen to Push on this album. It's 21 minutes, but there's not a wasted second on this entire thing. So much so that I think this shit demolishes Watch the Throne.
Okay,
Like, this
I knew. Yeah,
washes
I
Watch
knew
the Throne.
when you said that about Watch the Throne, and just knowing how much you like Daytona, that this wasn't going to be like, all right, well now we're rounding it up. Which way are you going to go?
Yeah.
So let me pivot from that and ask you a question then. And I know this or that portion of the show, you're picking Daytona. Is Daytona a top 5 hip hop album of the 2010s?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay, and you say that emphatically. You got 3
I
Kendrick
might have
ones.
answered too early.
Life is good.
Only for that reason.
Yeah,
Only for that
yeah.
reason, right? Because Kendrick has 3 of them.
Yeah.
Right? And then
Life is good.
Nas has at least 1.
Right.
Nas has at least 1.
Right. I mean, what else would it be if it's not Push? Because I would take Daytona over, and again, I'm not trying to seep too much into other conversations, but like, Damn, To Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City, yes. I would take Daytona over the other Kendrick stuff. I do think that this is a top 5 hip-hop
I'm going to go
album.
yes, but I would say it rounds it out.
It rounds it
It's
out.
not in
Probably
the-
number 5.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But still,
Yeah.
top 5. Now, is there anything on here that you would skip?
Not a blood clot ting.
No.
Like, seriously, like, it's one of those albums, like, what are you skipping? There's 7 songs, and there's not one where you're like,
I do have a weakest track on the album, and it's still strong.
Okay.
I would say that Santeria is the weakest track on this album.
I agree with that. I don't think it's bad, but the chorus kind of fucks it up for me.
I don't think it's the greatest shit, but am I skipping it? Hell no.
No, this is one of those front to back. Again, very short, but it's front to back for sure.
front to back.
Yeah.
Very short front to back. But yeah, I mean, this is I would say this is probably the easiest one we've ever done to me, which sounds crazy because it's Watch the Throne, and I know so many of y'all.
The easiest one we've ever done until I pick Watch the Throne.
Well, that's okay. All right. Why?
Because I do think that even though I like Pusha, I never had Pusha in that.
Are you really serious about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that. No, I'm not. I'm going with Daytona. Man, I'm back and forth on this shit all day, and I'm looking at like the highs of Watch the Throne, like No Church in the Wild.
Which is what I'd put it up against, but
and it's not even like Watch the Throne's too long. Like, I'm tying all the memories with that album.
Let me ask you this. If Watch the Throne was 8 or 9 songs and had those 5, like,
the fat
crazy
trimmed
bangers.
Okay, yeah. So we're getting rid of like.
What would you say then that is better than Daytona? Watch the Throne's best, it absolutely compares with Daytona. We do have to keep in mind, this is Kanye versus Kanye.
Yeah. If we stripped it down, I'd probably go Watch the Throne. I feel confident in saying that.
It's just the extra.
Yeah, if you gave me, let's just try and do the 7 songs here. If you gave me No Church in the Wild, I'll say In Paris because it's an anthem. Otis, Gotta Have It. That Bitch, I love that song. Little Charlie Wilson on it, almost has like a New Jack Swing type of feel. Murder to Excellence. Made in America, what is that, 5, 6, 7? I think that compiled together could go against Daytona, but it's the filler. It is the ones, because there, again, Watch the Throne, there are a few songs where you can tell, like Who Gonna Stop Me? Jay, his flow doesn't really work on that. He sounds a little clunky at times. So you trim out the fat on Watch the Throne, and I think it could be more of an argument, but I wanted to pick Watch the Throne so bad, but I can't. It's Daytona.
Yeah, I think most of that album is what the Irish would call shite. So
Okay.
I just think Daytona, they both have perfect production. But when you're talking about the content and the entire package put together, Daytona is
It's the one.
much, much better
And you would say it's a top 5 hip-hop album of that decade.
of the 2010s, which
Okay.
isn't, to some people that might sound like that's not much of an accolade, especially for the dusty backpackers that, are kind of on some like, it needs to sound like the 90s in order for it to be hip-hop,
yeah.
right? But the 2010s did, like, we can't be out here pretending like the last decade of hip-hop didn't give us a lot of good shit. You have to actively just be hating in order to get to that conclusion.
Like that just everything is trash now?
Yeah, like,
Or of the last decade
look,
or whatever?
not everything sounds like A Tribe Called Quest, nor
Yeah.
does it need to. Like, not everything is Illmatic, nor does it need to be. Like, as the
Or,
game grows,
3
music
Feet
changes.
High and Rising and all that, yeah.
It doesn't, everything doesn't need to sound that way. The 2010s gave us a lot of great music,
Gems,
and it gave
yeah.
us some classics, some all-timers. So for this to be an album that does round out my top 5 of the 2010s, I do think that that's an important thing,
Impact-wise and every, like,
I think
especially-
Pusha T should be happy that I have him as in my top 5 of the 2010s.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that when he watches this, he should feel incredibly honored that I gave him that distinction.
Yeah, it's probably like his Grammy nominated, sure, but an accolade from Frank,
That's just
it.
Awards don't last forever, but my words do.
Yeah, Pusha will never be that guy to me where, because I like bar-centric guys. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I still check for everything, excuse me, everything that Lloyd Banks drops.
You got emotional?
I did, man. I'm about to shed a tear. Pusha will never be in that category for me, but I enjoy his music. I will check if he drops a new project. I'll give it some spins. My brother's like his biggest fan, and I get that too. It's an age thing, but, well, not so much, but in terms of the solo stuff, it kind of is, right? Because Push didn't go solo until we were 20, 21, but this is a quality project, and it really is. If you don't have it in the top 5 of the decade, it's certainly in the top 10, so.
Yeah.
And Watch the Throne is probably in that top 10 to 15 conversation as well. So these are two, well, in my opinion, these are two really quality projects, one of which probably could have been a little bit better and a little bit trimmed down. But at any rate, I think they both still have great replay value. This isn't like songs in 2010, 2011, where it's like Swag Surf or like the what was the Roscoe songs, and like where it's like, man, it sounds so dated. The production here, because of Kanye, still sounds fresh. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, just shout out to Pusha T for winning this heavyweight bout. It's if you just on paper you got Jay-Z and Kanye versus Pusha T, seems kind of, first of all, as a handicap match,
Mm-hmm.
but secondly, it's two legends versus, some people might have Push as a legend, but objectively speaking, probably not, right? But I think he washed them, and that's dope. He has one of my favorite albums. They put together, they captured real magic with this album. So I guess my final thoughts would just be shout out Pusha T for putting together a perfect project.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly echo that. Pusha showed me that he can make a classic album. I don't know if I would have said that before this dropped.
Agreed.
Would have said he's he's great on features. He could put together a nice album, but this is a classic. Watch the Throne probably is viewed as a classic amongst many people just because of the sheer impact that it had.
is.
And I'm not mad at anybody saying that because it has timeless singles. And it was a very special period where both of them were able to get together and do a joint album. We're not going to see that again. But yeah, I would say Push is the winner there. So Until then, we'll see you next week, guys, with a new episode. Yuck.
Thanks for giving us a listen. Give us your feedback and let us know how you really feel. Subscribe, rate, review, and we'll see you next week.